And so when I was very young, in maybe the early 70s, I found her work at a library near me. And to paint the picture of that is a small town outside of Chicago, 4 blocks by 9. The library was in the basement of the village hall. The jail was on one side, the library was on the other. So you had to have a lot of courage to be a young girl to go get a book, because you were afraid, you know, some town drunk or something would come out of the jail. And you would find Pippi Longstocking, Encyclopedia Brown, and so on. But the first time I saw a book with a black woman on the back cover with an afro, I thought, wow. And I ran all the way home with the book, read it, and was very floored and disappointed. I was too young for the book. I didn't understand the sexual abuse, which the book was banned in those days from a lot of places because nobody understood that. We talk about it now, but you didn't talk about it then. And so I kind of vowed, I'm going to write a book and I'm not going to tell any of these awful things. And it took me about 20 years later to write a book and realize that you had to write what you knew. And sometimes those were awful things. I later interviewed Maya Angelou for Chicago Public Radio. I had a radio program. And I sort of felt that I would see her again. Over the years, I then ended up producing a radio program. So I did both radio and TV, had done some films by then, and did a program for Oprah Radio and had several hosts, Nate Burgess, Marianne Williamson, Peter Walsh, and Maya Angelou. Oprah Winfrey's generosity was, I want you to go down and see her and, you know, visit her and do 4 shows each visit for the radio. And I thought it was a great idea because by then she was older, she couldn't get around, and so we would do a radio show in her home. Maya Angelou's generosity when I got there was, you will stay with me, you won't have a hotel. And I wasn't going to turn that down. So for 4 years, from 2006 to 2010, I would stay at her home in Winston-Salem or in Harlem, or I would travel with her on the bus, because she traveled like a country music star on the bus, to wherever she was speaking. And it was during that time, since radio is all about the ear, it's like a book. You're in theater of the mind. You make your pictures up to go with what you hear or what you read. Unlike film, which concretizes a situation. So whenever you hear Thriller, you see Michael Jackson in the glove. You just don't have your own thoughts. So I'm sitting there listening in my ear with my headsets, and I'm like, uh-oh, this is history. Who goes from 1928 Jim Crow South, 1930s Great Migration, out to San Francisco? Like, who does that? And then 1954 tours the Europe with Porgy and Bess, goes to Croatia. Like, who was doing that? In 1954, if you decided to go as a family to another country, they would split up, some people on one plane and some on the other in case something happened. So you have to fall back into the history of that. And so as I saw that, and then President Clinton would call, Sonia Sanchez would stop by, which, what's her name, McBride, Martina McBride would say, open at the Grand Ole Opry for me. So I'm like, who has all of these relationships? And Jay-Z would say at a club, is the music too loud for you? And so I'm like, who has all of this? And then you notice that, how do you honor that? So I thought about a TV special, and I really couldn't get anyone to buy it. And by that time, this was around the time Brooks and Dunn split up, and they had an NBC special, and I thought we could do a special. But by that time, you have to be able to sit for about 5 or 6 hours to do a 2-hour special. And most people did not know that she was on oxygen. And that was pretty much kept out of the press because if she couldn't work, she couldn't live. And if you told people that, they wouldn't book you, and she wanted to be there. So eventually, I had done a number of documentaries, and I thought a documentary is the best way to honor her. So 2006 to 2010, I'm working with her once a month for those years. And then in 2011, I asked her, would she do a documentary? And it was amazing that there had never been one. One of the things was that she just didn't need it. She had done so much, and she had done 7 autobiographical memoirs. So she said 3 things to me. She said, do you know what you're asking? And I really didn't. I've come to realize that she knew what I was going to have to go through to get it done. She knew how big a project it was. But I was also asking her to go back over her life near the end of her life, and she had already done it. And so it was a gift for her to do it. The other thing she said, if you're going to take it all the way. And I knew what that meant. You saw what happened to that young woman that called her Maya. So I knew that it meant you better do a good job. And then she said something to me that was very personal about it, about how she felt it would affect me. And so at that point, in what we might call a parallel universe, Bob Hercules had done a couple of documentaries for American Masters, and he asked his old high school counselor, you know, I'd like to do something. And she, at the time, was working at Harpo, and she said, well, you know, you need to meet Rita Coburn because she's working on something. And so that's how we did it. We got together in 2011, and it took us until 2016 in January